I
Hi,
hit
Dave.
record at such the right time. Don't let me stop you. What were you going to say?
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Remind podcast. I'm Dr. Ashleigh Moreland and I'm joined by my co-host Dave Masterton. How you going, Dave?
Very good. Very good.
Yeah,
I've got my beanie on.
awesome.
For
Yep,
those watching on YouTube, beanie's on, fire's
yeah.
on.
The cold has come.
And look, I think in Tassie, we probably get a little bit more of the fair share of cold, being the next closest body of land, even though Melbourne's close, but Antarctica's not that far away.
Yeah.
So we
It's
do
been
get a little bit of
cold. It was
that.
6 degrees this morning when I went for a run. It was quite the
Brr.
frozen finger kind of situation.
Just keep on running.
So,
The
yeah.
blood will get there eventually.
That's literally what I was telling myself because I was like, why didn't I bring a jumper? I was
Mm.
freezing. Anyway, what are we talking about today, Dave? Last week we spoke about healthy communication from the perspective of the talker.
Getting permission, I believe. It's sort of like for someone
Yeah.
who sort of starts to recognize, okay, I've got big emotions and I need to release. That's already incredible awareness. High five yourself for that.
Mm.
But then the next step is, well, when I know I need to release, how to release it in a healthy way, I suppose, or healthy time, and really to get permission.
Mm-hmm.
And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about it from the receiver, not someone who catches a football, but more from catching the conversation. If you're
Yeah.
dealing with someone who's not aware, or you're feeling as though, okay, I don't like this, but you kind of want to bring it up with them, how to handle that situation.
Yeah. And what it might bring up in you as well. Like,
Mm,
I think about, okay, well, let's go to the title, right? So, when someone is talking at you instead of with you. And
mm.
I experience this in my mind as when someone, okay, where's my little friends? Jemima, we've just named Jemima and
Here they
Hippo.
come. And for
When
those,
someone is talking at you, it's
mm,
this.
oh God,
When
there's our intro.
someone when someone is talking with you, you're together in the conversation. And it's just a mutual
Mm,
exploration of thoughts and ideas and perspectives. So when someone is speaking at you, it can feel real, like it literally can activate our stress responses and activate our trauma responses. And so when when our mind perceives the threat and we get defensive or we want to justify or we want to jump in some way,
I'm going
I
to jump
think,
in with an analogy.
yeah,
And,
go.
I've said this to you earlier because I've experienced it today. So when someone's talking at you, in my mind, they need you to do something. They need you to feel something. They need you to change something. They just need. It's all about sort of. I have to transfer something. There's like an action behind it. Where when you're talking with someone, it's like you two strolling through a garden, botanical gardens, whatever it is. There is really no agenda. It's just the exploration of the theme, the idea, the feeling, the whatever it is.
Yeah.
As opposed, so one's really agenda driven, which is you need to change your way. You need to understand how I'm feeling. You need to understand. You need to listen. You. Versus, okay, I'm feeling this way. Let's take a stroll this way.
Yeah.
There might be
Let's
some
explore it.
paths. Yeah, or there might not be some paths. Let's
Yeah.
touch grass with our feet. Just walk around.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? And I get
Mm,
this visual like when my husband and I are wanting to communicate things, especially if they're things that are hard to communicate, we sit side by side or we cuddle.
mm.
And that I only literally, as it was coming out of my mouth, thought, wow, that's actually really profound and really powerful. Where we've had times where we've gone out for dinner and we sit across from each other and we've completely shut down. We've not been able to continue conversation because one of us has been triggered, and sitting across from each other activates
Ooh,
like a trauma response in the other person. And then we've sat there and avoided eye contact and eaten our meals really quickly and left. But it's
gotcha.
so fascinating to me that we have our best conversations in the car when we're sitting next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you're quite tranced out in the car because your peripheral vision, you got stuff going past you a lot.
Mm.
So that's fascinating, isn't it? Like
Well,
speaking with someone instead of to.
well, I mean, yes. So I either like face to face, eye to eye, can be either quite intimate with a discussion, or it can be very confronting
Yeah.
because it's
Oh, it
sort of like
depends on the nature of the discussion, isn't it? I mean, if
exactly,
my
but that
husband and I are standing in front of each other, whispering sweet nothings and telling each other how amazing and grateful we are,
like
then
you really hone in on that intent, that energy, that love. Yeah.
yeah, and it's beautiful. But
Mm.
if we're face to face standing in front of each other, basically implying that the other person's terrible or the other person's made a mistake or you did this wrong or you didn't do
Hmm.
that, then that feels quite threatening.
Well, it's an amplification of it. And
Mm,
you never, well, I won't say never, I'll go back. You know, when you're at that point and you're trying to hold it together and
yeah.
you're right at the tipping edge of whatever it is, but let's just say that you're overwhelmed and someone comes up to you and says those magical words that always send you over the top.
What's wrong?
Are you okay?
Mine's
And
what's wrong. I'm like,
yeah,
why are you assuming something's wrong?
yeah, or are you okay? No, right, and you're holding it in, and again, it's that whole thing of someone looking at you with the concern and the words and all of that. Where
Mm,
sometimes it can be very confronting, and I've had this with other family members. They will shut down if you want to talk about something deep, and you're looking them in the eye.
yeah,
Because I don't mind looking at someone in the eye, but not everyone's comfortable with that.
yeah.
And so it sort of becomes quite confronting, and they don't want to look like they're teary, or they just have this thing where it's sort of like, I'm feeling so uncomfortable right now because the level of vulnerability I'm going to have to go to get through this is going to be difficult. So
Yeah.
I've said, would it be easier if we have this conversation and we're looking away from each other?
Mm,
We're still within proximity, but it's almost like back to back, but you're looking that way and I'm looking that way. Eh,
it's less threatening.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And this is like animal behavior, right? Animals literally have to look at their predators.
Hmm. Well, that's
It,
why our eyes are at the front of
it's
our head as humans.
it's survival. Yeah,
Yep.
totally. So yeah, it's very fascinating. This affects men more so
Mm.
than women. Just
Having eyes at the front of their head, or
yeah, definitely.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay, gotcha.
that's actually why they can never find things, and we have to say have a women's look.
Oh, boys, look, there we go.
Yeah.
But as you're saying, it affects men more about being the
And
sort of vulnerable
face to
side.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
face to
is it
face.
the vulnerability? Because a guy could square up to another guy.
Yeah, exactly. They could square up to another guy, but that's threat.
Yeah, but it's
They're
not
doing it
necessarily
because of
the
threat.
eye to eye bit that I got a problem with. It's the
But
implied
if
vulnerability.
if I was in a romantic relationship with a male,
Let's skip to the good part. Yeah.
I
There
am
you
in a
are.
romantic relationship with a male. Not if. But if a woman is in a romantic relationship with a male, their communication needs are going to be really different just because neurobiologically they're wired differently. So for a male, sitting across from them feels more threatening, whereas a
Ah,
female, it doesn't. Some of them, it does,
interesting.
absolutely.
Because I would have thought it'd been more the other way around. But
No,
yeah, wow.
no, because men come face to face with their predators or with their prey. So it's a
Mm,
primal survival thing, whereas women come around each other in community. So
gotcha.
think about how do men hunt? Their tribe are here. and their prey or predator is in front. Whereas
Interesting.
women, our tribe is here.
All in front. Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's really fascinating. But quite often, when a woman is wanting to have a vent or a rant or get something off her chest,
Hmm.
she goes here. And
Gotcha.
then the man straight away, it's threat. And what's happening when there's a pardon me, what's happening when there's a threat? Front of the brain is offline. You are not having a logical, rational, reasonable conversation
Mm.
anymore. You've
Primal.
activated survival mode. Like, what are you going to get? Fight, flight, or freeze?
Mm.
So they're going to shut down. They're going to get defensive in fight, or they're going to just completely dissociate.
And then does slowly, because I'm just going back to maybe potentially arguments I've had in the past,
Mm.
um, that you start off in that sort of, I suppose, um, that primal stage, and then slowly build your way into the logical. And by that stage, you sort of think, why are we arguing about this? And then,
Mhm.
but you've just spent the last half an hour defending something or arguing about a portion of the argument that has got to do with what, say, something was said, or and then dissecting what was said during the argument,
Yeah.
and suddenly you're so far from the original argument, it's not funny.
Yeah. And then, so when do you notice that you get to that point where you're like, that was like really irrational? When the neurochemicals are processed out of your body, like when the adrenaline has passed through your
Mm.
body, and when your prefrontal cortex comes back online, when your rationality comes back, you're like, gee, that
It,
was so pointless.
it
That
comes back and
felt
goes,
like an
what did I
11,
miss?
felt like an 11 out of 10, but like, really? We
Mm.
just got to that level over, I don't know, dishes or something. Like,
Mm.
it's wild.
And it's fascinating because how does all of this come into, at the top of the episode we talked about how do we navigate when someone is coming at us with an intense chaotic energy,
Yeah.
and how do we deal with it? How do we it's not really up to us to diffuse it, but maybe recognize it. Maybe part of it might be diffuse it. Maybe part of it is understanding when it's happening versus when you might sort of think, okay, this is, what's reasonable, what's not, and all of these kind of things. But really, what goes on when someone comes at you? And I think in last
Mm.
episode, you spoke about an example of husband and wife. Wife's at home with the kids, and the husband comes home, and the wife has just gone full capacity with everything that's happened during the day. And then I think I use the word launch, but just really just unloaded or
Yeah.
decompressed in a very quick manner. And then how do you handle that? And in last episode, we spoke about how when you have the awareness of you might be doing this, how to navigate through that
Mm.
and seek permission from the other person. In this episode, it's going to be about how do we handle it or navigate it
If
from
some
the
Yeah,
receiver's point of view.
if it's a dysfunctional transaction, like if someone
Hmm.
didn't seek permission and they are just vomiting their rant all over you, and
Hmm.
you know that you don't have capacity for it, you don't it's not a good time to hear it, whatever it might
Yeah.
be, then how do you navigate that? And I like a framework of, with this, I think about human needs, and I think about if the human needs, because the stress centers of the brain, I think, can always be diffused with certainty, significance, and connection.
Hmm.
And so, just as we chat about this, the thing that comes to mind for me is that person is clearly dysregulated. Like, they are in a stress response in that moment. Their
Hmm.
rational, logical mind is no longer at the helm. So,
At
then
that
how do you,
moment. Yep.
at that moment, and that's why they're not asking for permission. They're not
Hmm.
even conscious of their behavior. They are just, trains left the station, it's gone.
Hmm.
And the tricky thing is if you just react to that because you don't have capacity to hear it or it's not a good time, and you react to that in a way that doesn't have certainty, significance, or connection, what do they receive from that?
Mm. Well, especially if you're triggered, right? So let's just go back to this example.
Totally. Yeah.
Um, Someone goes blah 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 as soon as you walk through the door, or just out of nowhere, you're sitting there scrolling through TikTok because it's your favorite thing to do. They're on the couch, they look at you and just go blah 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 blah. Blah. Or you're out and about, and someone you know that you just quietly see, they come at you and blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
And then it could activate any of those things, including a trigger. What's a
Totally.
I suppose a response that I've had in the past, which is a bit more of an unhealed version, especially if that person, it's more than just a one off. I think
If it's a
most
pattern, it's a
people will
pattern.
have that sort of compassion to go, if this person has never done this before, then they'll go, is everything okay? Right? Or, whoa. Versus if someone's doing it, say, more than once, or you believe this is a pattern, or you're kind of fed up with it, whether it be once or twice or whatever, then you're tempted to go, you always do this. Why are you being like that?
Oh,
What, right?
my
Hey,
toes are curling.
yeah. Can you hear the bell fight going off at a ding,
Yeah.
ding, ding, ding? And in the red corner,
Yeah.
ladies
And
and
we are
gentlemen.
off.
Exactly.
Totally. Totally.
And,
So,
and it's, yeah,
well, I was just
or,
going to say what I was getting at before is if you just react, and that reaction is coming from a space of I don't have capacity for this, I don't want to have to listen to this, I
mm,
don't it's not a good time, whatever it might be. If you just react again without considering or honoring the other person, that's going to mean they're going to assume you don't care about me,
mm,
I mean nothing to you. You don't love me. I'm not good enough. I'm not seen. I'm not heard. All the stories come to the surface, which is just, where's that fuel? Just pour it on the fire, baby.
mm-hmm,
Come on. And that perpetuates their wounding and their story.
mm,
Whereas if we bring an element of significance, certainty, and connection, what
mm-hmm,
might we say? First of all, it might look like acknowledging them, going, I can see that you're really upset right now, and I love you. Now is not a good time. Can we
mm,
talk about this later? Or can we talk about this once the kids are in bed? I can see that you're really struggling right now, but I'm feeling really overwhelmed and I can't give you the support that you need.
mm,
I'm going to go and calm myself down. And as soon as I can be the person that you need me to be, I'll come back and we can continue this conversation. And so that there's certainty because we're saying this is how this is going to go. When the kids are in bed, we're going to talk about it.
mm,
Or when I am feeling less overwhelmed, then we can come back and talk about it. So certainty equals safety to the nervous system. I think that's a
mm,
really basic point. But then significance and connection diffuses all of those underlying stories the other person has. So
mm,
it diffuses the stories of you don't care about me, you don't love me, you don't want to listen to me. Every story that could possibly come up is diffused by saying, I can see you're really upset and I really love you. I don't have
mm,
capacity to hear you right now. Let me go and calm myself down so then I can show up better for you.
mm,
And it's just saying, this is about me, not you. And I can see that you really need to get this off your chest, but I got nowhere to hold it. My bucket's full.
mm,
So having those boundaries, that is completely up leveling an agreement in a relationship where it's
mm,
you didn't have the self-awareness to ask permission and all this, but it's on me to uphold a boundary for working towards healthier communication.
or even not even upholding a boundary. Like, yes, it is, but you're actually modeling communication here.
Yeah.
So instead of telling them you need to communicate better, it's sort of like, well, stop, don't even use those words. Just show them what that looks like.
Yeah.
Now, they might not actually see it in the heat of the moment, especially when they're in round one and they're expecting to go 10 rounds with you.
Yeah.
But you're kind of modeling it, and especially, and we're talking about from a romantic sort of perspective or relationships, and we will get into friends, colleagues, people, because it just doesn't happen with our significant other. It happens with others, but we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But you're actually modeling it, which I think is really important, because at that point in time, yeah, they need to be seen, heard. There's something that's gone astray.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to sort of say, hey, look, this feels like a really big moment for you, and I want to be there for you. But what I have now, I don't think is going to give you the attention that you deserve. So
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do whatever it is, insert it here. Can we come back to it? Is there something else we can do in the meantime, or is there something else, because they're still holding this,
Totally.
and go from there. And
And
it's not.
it's even stuff like you can do this in text messages as well. Like, I only just recently had a friend reach out saying, "Oh my gosh, I need to vent. I'm so angry right now." And I just responded with, "I my inbox is completely open. You can write whatever you want. I'm letting you know that I don't have capacity tonight to be able to respond. I'm about to fall asleep, but I will come back to you."
Mm,
And that it's about diffusing. If you can recognize that every person on the planet is going to have a, oh, the goggles are back, this episode's got it all. Every
yeah.
person on the planet has their dodgy goggles, and they're going to be perceiving that
Mm,
situation in the worst possible way, the most dysfunctional way, simply because the front part of their brain's offline. The rational, logical part of their brain is gone skis.
mm,
So if that's the case, and you know that the assumptions they're going to make are going to be through the lens of their wounding, then it's actually our responsibility to support them with the certainty of going, "You won't be hearing back from me tonight. I'm just about to fall asleep. I love you. My inbox is a safe space. So you just pour your little heart out. And tomorrow, when I have space, I'm going to come back to you."
mm,
So there's no uncertainty around it whatsoever. They know that they can just go to town, they can do whatever. But
mm,
because they've just poured their heart out and then I don't get back to them, they're not sitting there going, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't have sent that. Maybe I upset her. Maybe I, she doesn't love me.
mm. Yeah,
Maybe I've embarrassed myself," which then is a shame spiral.
yeah.
So when I'm talking about the certainty, significance, and connection
Mm,
stuff, that is literally the antidote to stop the spiral.
mm. And when you're talking about that spiral, you can also spiral in other ways. Like if I say to you, hey, I know you're feeling big feelings right now, and you know, you've launched at me or whatever it is, and I say, I don't have the time right now, but I want to give you
Mm.
certainty and I want to do all of this. But you've got to remember the, what do we call it? The front part of the brain, the logic part's gone. So
Mhm.
are they hearing what you're saying, or are they basically looking at your mouth move and hearing the, and what they're hearing is, I don't have time for this. I don't love you.
Well,
Right?
generally, that's really interesting. So if we let them finish and then talk, they won't hear it. But if we abruptly, if
Now
we
that's not, now
literally,
just for everyone watching, that's not, we don't slap them. I mean,
no,
no, we don't slap
we're
them.
not slapping them. But I'm talking about, because when people get on these ranty, completely, they're not conscious of it, the train's
Mm.
left the station. The only way that that ends is either if you wait for it to finish or if you crash into it.
Yeah, see,
And
I
so,
would I would always wait for it to finish.
yeah,
There's really not a scenario
in
where
which
I'll,
case there's no boundary there because it's
well,
like, well,
I'm happy for it to finish because it's sort of, I'm not taking it, like, it's sort of like they need to exhaust it, because either way, in my mind, if I clap or if I crash into it, am I putting them in a more unsafe feeling in their body? They're already
Okay.
dysregulated.
So, yeah, so that's a really good point. The thing that that does is it's a shock factor. You know how someone can be completely out of it, but you throw
Mm.
water on them and then it brings them back and they're like, "Oh my gosh."
So you're saying
And
next
they come
time
back into
I
it.
get into an
So it's
argument,
not
I
no,
toss water?
David, please don't throw water on someone. Please don't slap them. Please don't. What I'm getting at is sometimes loving someone well can look like interrupting a thought pattern that has left the station. And it might just be like just, okay, so imagine my husband's in front of me and he's ranting and carrying on. It might be just gently touching his shoulders and going, I can see you're really upset and I love you so much. I am literally going to pee myself if I don't go and wee. Can I please come back as soon as I'm finished in the toilet and we can finish this conversation? That's a silly example. But if
Mm,
it was that I am so overwhelmed and I do not have capacity to hear this, then it's the touch is an anchor back to the present moment, because that rant is not present
mm,
moment. That's like past.
gotcha.
Um, or future. So touch is a really powerful anchor that brings people back into their body for the present moment. So it might be a gentle hand on this part of the arm is quite safe for a lot of people.
Hmm.
Um,
Or
kind of got to
maybe
be
like on the side of
careful.
the shoulder.
Yes, side of the shoulder can be really generally safe, but you're going to know your person.
Mm,
Like if someone just doesn't like being touched on the shoulder, don't touch them on the shoulder. If they don't like being touched on the arm, don't touch them on the arm. But touch them in a way that is innocuous and safe for them, that brings them back. Because this is why I get clients to place their hand over their heart,
mm,
because especially clients who experience freeze or dissociation, because the touch of their own hand on their own body brings them back into their body.
mm. Okay.
And so to have awareness of that touch, awareness is a front of brain function. So we're supporting the front of their brain to come back online through the awareness of our touch, of our interruption, of whatever it is. And that is what supports them to hear what we're saying without being upset about it.
Mm,
Whereas if we let them finish, we're actually supporting the front of their brain to continue to be shut down and the back of their brain to be driving their behavior. So if we still talk in that without any anchor to bring them back to the here and now, to awareness with the front of the brain switched on, then they're still just as dysfunctional. There's no boundary there.
I just got this thing where if someone's overwhelmed or dysfunctional and you do something like that, what's some of the possible negative responses you could get from that? Like, don't touch me. You're not listening to me. You,
That's
I don't know.
okay. That's okay. 100%. It's like if my daughter is really, 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 really teeing off,
Mm,
and she doesn't want to listen to me, and she might even be screaming, "Get out. I don't want to talk to you. Go away. No, blah," whatever it
I
is.
hate you.
And
Okay.
I might just do this and say, "Elodie, I can see this is really hard for you right now, and I'm here when you're ready.
Mm,
I'm here for you as soon as you're ready, I'm here for you." And
mm,
she doesn't have to like it. She might scream at me saying, "Don't touch me, get off, get out, blah, blah,
mm,
blah." And that's okay. And I can still honor and respect that. But her reaction to my healthy boundary is actually not my issue. That's not my
mm,
problem, because I can't control how someone reacts to me. My responsibility is upholding a boundary of healthy communication.
mm.
People don't have to like it. People don't have to react well to it. But I've done my bit.
So you're sort
And
of saying if you feel like you're being called to let it run out, then maybe think about ways in which you could interrupt it as
well,
opposed to letting
ask
it.
the question, am I letting it run out because I have the space and the capacity and I want to support them? If that's the case, sure, awesome.
Yeah, that's a
But
valid
this
point.
is this
Yeah.
is off the back of, like, I'm not saying to do this every time someone rants or
Mm,
vents at you. I'm
mm,
saying to do this if that ranting or venting is actually taking from you.
Or
If
triggering and
you don't have the
activating. Yeah.
capacity for it,
Mm,
if you are overwhelmed and triggered by it, if you need time and space, if it's not a good time for you, you don't get to make it the other person's responsibility to honor you with
mm,
asking permission and all that stuff,
mm,
because their prefrontal cortex is already gone. The train's already left the station. They missed their window of being regulated enough to ask permission. So if their behavior is saying they're dysregulated, well, then the healthy communication boundary comes onto you. And
mm,
so
mm.
if you don't have capacity to hear it, but you let them finish, you've actively participated in unhealthy communication. Whereas if you don't have capacity to hear it and you want to participate in healthy communication, that boundary is on you, not the other person.
Okay. Similar scenario in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
No
Love
touchy
it.
touchy there. Um, because you get that a lot, right? So we've been talking about
Mm-hmm.
a loved one, family member, something like that. Now let's move it to friend, acquaintance, but most importantly, the workplace, where you're sort of
Workplace. You
forced
say the
to in.
person's name.
Oh,
You say the person's name because they'll have a very strong anchor to their name. Most people, when they hear their name, will look because their brain is so anchored to
into
responding to their name.
okay,
So you would just say, David, David.
yes,
And as soon as you come back, you're out of your rant now. And so you're not wherever your mind has gone. You're back in the room with me because your brain has automatically responded to your name and you come back.
okay. And are there like I could picture a couple of situations I've been in before where someone is so deep in their rant, it's almost like there's so much tunnel vision, they've got no idea of their surroundings.
Exactly. Yep.
And so what you're sort of saying is say their name. If that doesn't work, wait, say their name again.
Louder.
Um, and then eventually either the tunnel vision will open up or
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Yeah.
And then repeat what we sort of said. Maybe you don't need to say to your
Exactly.
colleague, I love you, I'm here for
Yeah.
you. It could be
But
different
you'd
language.
say, I really care about what you have to say.
Mm,
And also, if we're in a relationship where, like, something I teach businesses and something I use in my family, even, is everything comes back to values.
mm,
So, in a business, for instance, one of our values is love is at the center of everything we do. We honor
mm,
each other. And so, I might say in our home, kindness is a value. So,
mm,
I might say something like, I really care about you. And because we value love and kindness, I'm going to have this conversation with you when you can do it with those values,
mm,
basically. So what I say to my kids relentlessly is, in our home we value kindness. I'm willing to have that conversation with you when we can do it with kindness.
mm,
And it forces them to come back. And so that what's required in that, they have to actually turn on the front part of their brain and go, value is kindness. They have to actually draw that connection.
link.
And
Yep.
then they have to question, if I was doing this with kindness, how would it sound? What would it look like?
Mm,
How would we be talking? And so what that's doing is it's actually saying, this is not kindness, this is kindness. So I'm
mm.
willing to talk about this with you, but how can we talk about it where we're talking with each other in
Exploring the
kindness,
theme, not being
not
directed
at
to. Yeah.
each other? Yeah.
All
And
right.
so that is our healthy communication boundary.
Mm,
It's just that people need to practice the language. Honestly, the biggest barrier that I had was I didn't know what to say. And
mm.
it wasn't as because obviously if I'm starting to go into a stress response, because it's not immediate, we don't immediately shut off our brain and go into a stress response. What
It's not an
happens
active decision, by the way.
is the stress response. I can feel
Mm,
stress starting to rise in my body. So while I still have the awareness of the stress response starting to rise in my body, that's my window.
mm,
And in that window, I need to be able to deploy one of my tactics. So if my tactic is, I really care about you and I want to have this conversation, we're going to have this conversation. I'm feeling overwhelmed and I'm going to come back and we'll have it as soon as I'm feeling better. Well, then I need to have that statement, practice the statement, have it in my arsenal that is just second nature, that can roll off my tongue when I can deploy it on the
Mm.
upward spiral of a stress response.
Which
Because when I,
starts, yeah, which starts with having to fake it till you make it. It's sort of like you have to think about it to learn it, and then
yeah,
over time it
don't
becomes second
don't be
nature.
thinking, don't wait for the invitation to practice it.
Mm.
I literally get clients to, we will sit down and work out whatever statements work best for them in their language and their tone and
Yep.
in the circumstance as well. Like, you spot on saying the way you would handle that with your husband or wife is going to be really different to how you'd handle that with a colleague.
Mm.
But you need to have the statements on hand ready to go. But you can't wait for the situation to arise before you go, because then I'm going to get overwhelmed and go, I don't know what I was going to say. I know that I meant to set a boundary here, but I can't remember what I was going to
Mm.
say or how to do that. So I usually get people to write out, literally teach them scripting, write out some statements that you can just practice. Record it, listen to it in the car on repeat, continue saying it, say it in front of the mirror every morning so that it's so second nature. It's just like saying, would you like fries with that?
Mm.
So
With,
helpful.
with with
I don't
with
know if
what? I mean, now I'm just thinking quarter pounder. What have you done? Uh,
Yeah, I'm fasting again, so
all right. This
that's
is not
torture.
sponsored by McDonald's. Um, and I think once we've gone through that scenario, so we've covered loved ones, family, and I know we've just sort of skipped over it. But I mean, the fundamentals are there. The fundamentals are solid. There's only
It's
so
a
much you can
framework.
really, you can only say
Yeah,
so much about it. It's how you explore it and how you can fill it out with your own vocabulary. We've spoken
yeah.
about colleagues. Let's have a quick discussion before we wrap up the podcast about. Let's talk about what's maybe, well, I'll refer to the aftercare of the event,
Mhm,
which is sort of like, okay, this thing happened and I feel as though I'd like to raise it with that person
mhm,
at a later date, not for the sake
mhm.
of criticizing, but how can we maybe provide awareness around it, let them know how it made them feel.
I love this because now the listener becomes the talker, which we talked about in the previous episode. So if
Is it?
you are the
And
one who is committed to improving communication and increasing the bar for healthy communication, then it's your responsibility to be the one to model asking permission, to be the
mm-hmm,
one to model setting those boundaries, to be the one to uphold boundaries, to be the one who, if that boundary has been pushed and that person has ranted and vented at you, at a time when the person is regulated, you might have that conversation with them and go, hey, there's something really important I'd like to talk to you about. When is a good time to have that conversation? Because then you're
mm,
modeling that to them. That's healthy communication. And then when you sit down, again, it's about framing. The other day, that didn't feel good for me. When we had that conversation, when that was
mm,
happening, that didn't feel good for me. Did it feel good for you? And you're going for the walk through the park.
mm,
I
absolutely.
wonder what would feel better for us.
Mm,
Because it seems like you had really big emotions, and how could we do that differently? How could we do that better?
mm.
And our next episode has to be on the do-over.
The
The
do-over.
do-over.
I
So
love it.
when we are trying to learn and we screw it up, and then we have these repair conversations, I'm
Mm,
a huge fan of this concept that I call it the do-over or the redo. Um,
the control Z.
mhm.
Undo,
Yeah.
undo, undo.
Yeah, and go, "I'm really not happy with how I showed up just then, and I'm working
Mm.
on doing better. Do you mind if I have a do-over? I wanna try again."
And the level of vulnerability even required in that, especially if your pride's a little bit hurt,
Yeah.
especially in like in the workplace when you're dealing with a colleague and they call you out on it and you sort of go, well, I remember all the times that you've done this. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
actually, that's at that point, yeah, you could give them all the reasons why you could justify because now you're comparing, well, I might have been crap that time, but I know all these different other things. And but that vulnerability to go, you know what, in that moment, I feel as though I could do better and I'm sharing that. It's vulnerability. And that's great. The do over. Because even
Yeah.
when you share that with some people come at it and sort of go, thanks, and really listen. Some people will say thanks just for, the optics of the situation, especially in a workplace, and do nothing about it, right? And some people will sort of go, well, you know what, you're being too sensitive. Suck it up,
Mm.
right? Um, there, I don't know. Like, there's maybe a couple of more scenarios, but they're the in my mind the big three.
Yeah.
Now you can raise it um, in a healthy way, like you said, when it's sort of regulated and around the stage of, I'd like to talk to you about that. It seemed as though you had something really big happened, and I'd like to talk about in the future how I can help you before you get to that point.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. And what is that, Dave? That's this going, that didn't feel
mm,
good for me. How about you? Yeah, no, that didn't feel good either. So
mm,
next time something like that happens, what do you need to hear from me? How can I help you better? How can we do better next time? Because that's a
mm,
we conversation, not a you need to do this better next time. Because
yeah.
that's a speaking at conversation.
And normally that you do this all the time, normally happens in response to the next time they do the same thing.
Mm,
You always do this. You need to calm down. You need to lower your voice. You need
yeah,
to shut up. You need
yeah.
to, um,
Go and feed the dog.
so what's that?
Go and feed the dogs.
So it's, yeah. And look, and a big part of the modeling of it all is not for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And so it might not be for them now, but it might be something they circle back and remember later on in life.
Yeah.
But,
I
you
tell
know,
you what, I have never experienced a relationship where we have been able to have enough grace that the expectation isn't that we show up perfectly all the time. That's unreasonable.
no.
But the expectation is that there's a level of self awareness and self accountability, and the ultimate commitment to loving and honoring the other person well, where we're willing to have these conversations. And
Mm,
my husband and I were just walking. We walked our kids to school one day this week, and we're walking home together. And we had a conversation around what's the one thing I need to work on? What is the one thing I need to work on? And through our conversation, he raised something that I have a tendency to do when I am in a trauma response, and that's my one thing that he wants me to work on. And same with him,
mm,
there's one thing that I want him to work on. And so that's our commitment to each other. And it doesn't mean to say that because we've agreed to work on it, we get it right 24/7. But it's about practicing, and it's about recognizing, okay, that's important to them. So when I recognize that I haven't met that, I need to actually honor them and say, hey, I'm really sorry that, I didn't show up the way that I agreed to show up. Can I
mm.
try that again? I'm not happy with the standard I just set.
The do-over
Mm.
for next week's episode.
Click subscribe if you haven't already, because you won't want to miss it.
Actually, and it costs you nothing to hit the like button.
You know what? Even
Just
leave us
saying.
some comments. Leave us some love hearts.
Yep, yep. And if you've made it to this part of the video, well done. We're 45-ish minutes into it. But drop us some comments. Exactly what Ash is saying. What do you want
Mm.
to hear? Do you want to? Ash and I have been talking about maybe adding to the podcast a bit of a how-to videos, much shorter,
Mm.
not conversational, but how we would go bang, bang, bang. Got any
Yeah.
ideas on what you'd like the how-tos on?
Well, that's it.
Hit
And
the
jump over
comments.
to our Instagram and our Facebook page, the Remind Institute, because we post tips there. We post literally like little statements you can start practicing. So there's lots of resources. Jump across all the channels. Use the resources. They're
And
free.
we're building it. We're building the resources.
Mhm.
So, we've
And
got
if
a
you do
catalog
want to deep
now of,
dive,
50 plus videos. By this time next year, it'll be over 100 videos. And so
awesome.
it's building,
Yeah,
building, building,
absolutely.
building.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, and if you get to the point where you go, oh my gosh, I need to learn how to do this, I want to do this, I want to deep dive, then reach out. I run
Yep,
programs where we deep dive into this, and we would absolutely love to have you.
absolutely. Well said. All right. Great episode. Till next week. Bye bye.
Bye.